So I want to talk to you today about one of the things that sucks most about relationships when things do suck and what you can do about that. People call me and say, we are arguing so bad and it's miserable for both of us. We have these terrible arguments and it just drives people crazy. And so I want to talk to you about what it is that's a lot of times happening that causes arguments to escalate and what it is that you can do about it. I'm going to give you a process here that will help you address that. So, first of all, the thing that's happening that is causing arguments to escalate is generally that one partner or the other is getting flooded. And when we say flooded, what we're talking about is a state of being emotionally overwhelmed. And you can identify that because there's physiological stuff that's happening in your body. Your heart rate is hitting 100 beats per minute or more. That's the first thing. You know that you're flooded when your heart rate is at 100 beats per minute or more. But because of that, your heart rate being up, there's also other things going on, like your respiration has sped up. Your hands may be trembling, your voice may be trembly. You may feel a sensation of heat, like on your cheeks or the back of your neck. There's all kinds of physical sensations that different people feel when they get flooded. So when that happens, I mean, when you get flooded like that, there is no productive conversation possible. Because what's actually happening there when you're flooded is that blood that is supposed to be feeding your rational brain, your cerebral cortex, the part of you that makes you human, that blood gets diverted away from your cerebral cortex and goes down to your brainstem. And your brainstem really only manages like three things, right? It's very primitive, and it manages fight, flight, or freeze. Okay. No wonder arguments aren't getting you anywhere. Okay. You start getting worked up like that, and your rational brain goes offline. So you're literally no longer in your kind of right mind. Your judgment is compromised. Okay. You lose touch with your empathy, with your love, right? With a lot of those, with your commitment, you lose touch with those sort of very human kinds of like commitments that you've made and very human feelings. And you are in your lizard brain, right there in your brainstem, and you are wanting to fight or flee, or maybe you even just freeze. Okay. And that's what happens over and over and over and over. And that's a condition that we call flooding. Okay. It's just being emotionally overwhelmed and having physiological signs in your body. So you have to get that under control. Okay. So what I will have you do to think about how you might get it under control is ask you the question, for those of you who have kids, when a 3-year-old loses it and they're completely out of control, what do we normally do as adults? We'll kind of snatch them up at some point and just put them in timeout, right? And what happens in timeout? Nothing. They're sitting there. They're away from the situation that got them upset. It's very boring. So they're just kind of staring at a wall. Okay. So we need, as adults, we're in charge of our own emotional management. So we need to be able to put ourselves in timeout. We never outgrow the need to have to calm ourselves down, right? But as adults, a lot of times we just lose touch with it and we just barrel through. We get all upset in arguments and we try to make our points. It's like, no, we got to get back to, again, those things that we learned as toddlers, the things that we know instinctively to do with kids that we really need to think about applying more often to ourselves. We talked before about kindness and appreciation, how that's something we learn at our mother's knee. We also learn the importance of calming down. So let's talk about that. You're in an argument. Things are getting worked up, right? You're starting to feel the sensations in your body that you are getting flooded. So first of all, you need to be aware of what those things are. You have to know what the signs are of flooding in your own body. Okay? So you notice that flooding is happening in your body and you call a timeout. You say, I need a timeout. I can't do this anymore. I'm getting too worked up. I can't be productive in this conversation anymore. Whatever you want to say. But timeouts, when they're requested, must be granted. No arguing over whether you're going to give the timeout. No following your partner around. Like you never want to talk about anything. When a timeout is requested, It just has to be granted, right? It's the right thing to do, and nothing good can come of it if you don't do the timeout. So, all right, so after the timeout has been called, you're going to agree on a time when you're going to come back and, actually have this conversation. It needs to be minimum 30 minutes and not more than 24 hours. 30 minutes is the minimum it really takes to bring your heart rate down. So, you're going to agree on what that time will be, right? And then the next step is you're going to actually physically separate. You're going to get out of each other's line of sight. So you just go to separate rooms, or one of you goes out in the backyard, or whatever you have to do, so you can't see each other anymore. Sorry about that. Uh, so that's the next step. And then once you get into those separate rooms, what are you going to do then? Well, you're going to do, again, think of the toddler in timeout. What do we do there? We'll give them a blanket, or a teddy bear, a favorite toy, maybe a glass of juice, something that is going to help soothe the child. And Mr. or Ms. Adult that I'm talking to, you have to soothe yourself. You have to calm yourself. You have to get yourself into better headspace. Okay? So you practice self-soothing. Now, what that means is going to be different for every person. Self-soothing may be, reading a book, maybe taking a warm bath, maybe going out and messing around in the garage, out there. Um, Listening to music. It could be different things, and it will be for different people, but you need to know what you can do to calm yourself. And then you're gonna do that thing, and you're gonna help yourself calm down, bring your heart rate down. When your heart rate comes down, you'll feel that it happened, because you've had all this adrenaline in your body, and you've been all worked up. When that adrenaline starts to kind of filter through and you start calming down, that feeling, right? It's kind of a feeling of almost tiredness, or just kind of real calm. And that's where you can be more reflective. You can look back on the argument, at what happened. You can reflect on it. And that's exactly what I want you to do for the next step. Is when you're calmed down, I want you to look back on how things went wrong, and think back about yourself in that conversation. And I want you to ask yourself the question, how am I going to show up differently when we re-engage to finish this conversation? And get something in mind, right? Maybe you say, well, I'm not going to yell, or I'm not going to roll my eyes, or I'm not going to criticize my partner, or I'm going to try to listen more, or not slam the table with my fists. Whatever you need to do so that you're more present and more aware and more intentional about doing it better this time than you did it last time. Okay? Those are the steps. So of course, then you re-engage and have the conversation. We'll talk about actually doing that in future videos. But that's the process. Okay? You notice the signs in your own body that you are flooding. So you have to become aware of what those signs are. So that's a good thing to work on. You call a timeout. You and your partner agree on when you're going to get back together and finish this conversation, right? Once you've done that, you split up, you go into separate areas of the house, you get out of each other's line of sight. Then you practice self-soothing. So you need to be aware of what kinds of activities will soothe you. So there's another awareness exercise, all right? When you're done practicing the self-soothing, you've calmed yourself down, then you reflect back on the conversation, and you make some decisions about how do you need to show up differently in the conversation next time. So you can get real reflective, become real conscious of that, so that when you do re-engage, you can do it better this time, right? And of course, then finally you actually meet up at the appointed time and you have that conversation. Okay, so that's kind of an introduction. There's a lot more to this, but that's an introduction to flooding, what it is, how it works, why it will never lead anywhere good, and the intervention for flooding, which is learning how to emotionally manage yourself. And yeah, it's very similar to the way we're trying to emotionally manage little kids. So if it helps you to think of it that way, that's all you're trying to do, is practice good emotional management of your own self. Okay, so that's the process that we outlined today. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I ask you humbly, If you would be willing to share this on your own Facebook wall with your own friends and followers on social media, I would so much appreciate it. COVID, as you know, is still raging. There's a lot of weird stuff going on in the world. Life is really, really hard for people. And a big reason why I'm doing this is because a lot of people need help, and I'm trying to get help to people at no cost to them and just do all the good I can for all the people I can, and would just really appreciate any help you'd be willing to give me in that. Don't forget to check out my website, davidflowerstherapy.com. There you'll find icons where you can check out my social media channels. Catch me on any of those if you might want to. Check out my blog. Subscribe to that if you're interested. Anyway, just any way that you want to be part of this with me, I would love to have you along. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week. Bye bye.